is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable, Stu Horvath. And today we've got a super cool guest. Goblin Archives is here to talk about the Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition coming to BackerKit on April 15th. Goblin Archives, how's it going?
It's going good. We just got snow over here in the haunted Northwest, and so it's nice to have a snow day and catch up.
So I have a question that I've been dying to ask. Is it an archive run by goblins, or is it an archive of goblins?
Great question. Great question.
That's a good question. Get into the meat of it. Yeah, it's an archive run by goblins.
Okay, so there's not like a collection of like goblins in like stasis pods in your basement.
No. It's more like a dusty rows of books and things and trinkets and such stored for my reading and viewing pleasure.
Good, I'm relieved.
Well, very cool. You know, for our listeners who may not be familiar with it, why don't you tell them a little bit about Liminal Horror?
Yeah, so Liminal Horror is a game that I put out a number of years ago. It's a hack of Cairn. So if you know Cairn or Knave or any of those like really rules light, roll under systems that don't have a lot of stats and just are really easy to get to the table, I did a hack of it called Liminal Horror, which is for modern horror specifically, but like really you could adapt it to whatever you wanted. And so we've taken that and then we've released a few different official modules that have been like really fun, that really go in different sort of subgenres. I definitely pull a lot from film and inspired, as you can see, listeners can't see behind me, but my big VHS collection, which I regularly put on as I'm writing to get ideas. And so just sort of being able to take that OSR style-ish kind of play and able to apply it to sort of a modern horror contemporary setting, I found has been really fun. And so we're putting out a deluxe edition soon.
So I've long kind of said that like I didn't think that Dungeons and Dragons mechanics really worked well with horror. And then I started running my OSE West Marches game, and the terror that those players feel is palpable. What do you think? I mean, obviously you think that horror does work in a D&D like package, but are there challenges? How do you approach horror through that kind of old school system?
Yeah, so okay. So I don't think any like mechanics themselves can elicit horror in terms of like, I'm not going to be scared of a dice roll, or I'm not going to be scared of pulling a Jenga piece out. Like that in and of itself doesn't create horror or terror. Mm-hmm. But as you said, right, what comes through with play is it's about the situation. It's about the tension you've created as a game master. And it's about like sort of the stakes that the players have. So if they have a connection to their characters or the situation or an NPC that they really care about, and as you ratchet up the tension or start giving them more difficult choices where they have to make, that will have that sort of like lasting consequence, which I feel like that old school style play really leans into. And then also just sort of like the setup. D&D, like on its like what it is on the box of like delving into dark places. If you've ever delved into a dark place, it is pretty horrifying. The idea of being far from home, your flashlight's about to go out or your torch is about to go out, right? And you hear something creaking in the background and you're like, I only got like 3 HP left. And what's going to happen? Do I keep pushing on to get that gold? All of that is a situation that if you play it right, has that tension, that buy-in, those stakes that can really lead to like horrifying moments. Or if it's like, do I save my friend and put myself in danger and not survive? Or do I get out to save my other, like, right, that sort of push and pull. Which I think that really it's about how you set things up. And if you start to remove mechanics and have it really just sort of be bare bones RPG play, that helps you do that, I feel.
How did you approach, I mean, there's old school D&D, which is fairly bare bones compared to, the newer stuff. And then, Nave and Into the Odd and Cairn all sort of reduced that. And then I feel like Liminal Horror reduces it even more. How did you approach sort of the paring down of the system? What did you prioritize for keeping mechanically?
I like the idea with those like sort of pared down systems where it is like you make saves. So your, dex control, which is your like charisma, willpower, whatever, and then strength, and you roll when there's a risk. And so like that's also plays into the fact of like either narrate what happens or I roll when something has a risk because failure should be interesting and complicating the situation. And I'm really sort of rolling against myself. I'm not rolling against my GM or I'm not rolling against a target. Like I'm seeing whether I succeed. And sort of like it places that back onto the player. With Liminal Horror specifically, for those who I didn't play a lot of it, but like the sort of other than D&D, the thing that sort of like stands big in the horror RPG space is that Call of Cthulhu, right? Classic, it's big, has a long tail to it, right? The one thing I really specifically went into with Liminal Horror is there's a thing that Call of Cthulhu does that personally didn't sit necessarily the best with me in terms of the sanity mechanic and how they dwelt a lot with like, oh, you go crazy or oh this, and like they took these mental health impacts that like lots of people have and lots of people I care about and I know like deal with and turned it into like a negative. And that just sort of really felt icky. And so what I did was for Liminal Horror specifically, I created a system, we call it stress, which is like it's like metaphysical damage. Pretty much it functions the same as damage. It hits HP, then it hits your stats, and then what happened with it is if you sort of fail or succumb to that sort of stress damage is you become weird or you get a thing called fallout, which instead of it being like your mind breaks, it's more like you become those like monsters. You get sort of abilities-y kind of thing. And you just become like the thing that you're hunting or trying to figure out more, and you become stranger and changed. And I felt that part was when that finally clicked for me with the more is when it sort of, I was like, oh, this is something really cool. And then that's really, we've taken it and run with it. Me and my co-writer, Josh Domansky, who is, for those, I guess I skipped the thing of like with Liminal Horror currently, we have a dev team of me, Josh Domansky is my co-writer and designer, and then Zach Hazard is our creative artistic director.
Cool. Yeah, I applaud you for that, honestly, because, as a person with mental health struggles himself and I knowing so many people with it, that's something that didn't sit right with me either. For me, with 3-2-1 RPG, I did a similar thing. You just lose your cool. Your stats will drop by 1 and it just becomes harder for you to do some stuff because you're freaking out, but you're still able to be heroic and to rise to the occasion that you need to rise to. But, if you're getting chased by a dude with an axe, you might drop your keys. But yeah, right. I think it's other than just being a kind and empathetic thing to adjust that mechanic, it just I think it makes the game more fun. It makes it more inclusive for everyone to feel like they could still be the hero.
Right, and it's just to me, it's just more. It's just interesting in the sense of like I am not having to grapple with like how to play something that is, it focuses much more on like when you battle things, you become like them and you become changed like them. So it really puts that focus back into like the horrible and the weird as opposed to sort of like what the Call of Cthulhu tends to lean towards.
And I think it generally does also play into traditional style horror movies where like if you look at a Final Girl, they are in their own way having to become monstrous to survive this horrible situation that they probably shouldn't be in the first place.
Right. And so that idea, and that's a fun thing if you like continue it along and like play another session, like at beginning, I had to figure out like, are you agents? Are you this? And I decided to go with like, you're just normal people typically, right? In horror movie, you're just like in the situation. But in the sequel, right, you've dealt with it before. You're not normal, like, right? Like you're not the normal person. I survived Jason Voorhees, but like I'm still drawn into this weird world again. That's why those sequels work. And that to me is much more interesting.
Me too.
Some of the adventures you released for, the original Liminal Horror sort of expand the mechanics in interesting ways. Is that something that is getting folded back into the Deluxe, or are those going to be still standalone off to the side?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, luckily, so for context for the Deluxe, we very specifically chose not to do a 2E. So it is fully compatible with all lineages of anything that's been put out. The Deluxe is really just like a cool hardcover that collects all these tools and monsters and some like lore and usable things to be like this really usable kit. But all the original zines work. All the original rules are compatible. There's like been a few like official tweaks that we've added between a few, but on a whole, and like you said, different modules sometimes have different mechanics. And what's cool about, I always thought was really cool about like Cairn and Knave and all of that, was they were so pared down that you really could add things and add things for unique situations that work, that don't have to like necessarily be for every session I ever use, but I could use a mechanic for a specific story arc that would reinforce that genre. Like for the mall, we did the whisper cards, which was sort of like to emulate that idea of like are you changed, because that's like the thing set in a mall. And the best part about the thing is, do you know whether my co-players have been changed and replaced, or have I been replaced? And so it's a modular mechanic that works for that, but that you don't need to continue on to different adventures if you don't want to. And sort of the system is so lean in its sense that you can add modular mechanics. And we have a pretty good third-party environment of like creators. And I always say one of the things you can think about to tweak are, you tweak the Fallout, so that really reinforces the genre. You can change like character creation to really make sure you reinforce the genre. How do you set up the scenario? And you can add or change the sort of like supplemental mechanics to reinforce a specific like horror genre. And so like I necessarily haven't put all of them into the Deluxe edition because they are in the different adventures, but that idea that you can modularly change, because in the end, what you take to your table, like I'm giving you the tools, but you at your table can do whatever you want. Like
Right, yep.
You can play it however you want. You can change however you want. Nothing is sacred to me in terms of what I've written. I've just wanted to give you the tools to have fun play.
It's funny that you bring up the mall and the whisper deck, because that's exactly the one I was thinking of, because I love that mechanic so much. And I thought that it was like, it works really well as sort of like the thing, are they the thing kind of mechanic. But I also think that like it's the closest I've seen in the indie sort of space to sort of come across a mechanic that is like the drama decks in Alien, which I think are really work really well for that game. And I just want to see them elsewhere. But it's hard because they require like a deck of cards. So like it's, oh God, that's such not indie. But the whispered cards, just I love that concept and good stuff.
It took forever to figure that one out for me, and when it clicked, and then when I finally ran it at play, I created some of my favorite moments. For those listening, whisper cards, when something weird or you got exposed to like a potential like story beat almost in the mall, because you're trapped in this mall where a thin creature is replacing people pretty much. Characters would draw these whisper cards that would either give them some sort of narrative prompts they could lean into, or it would say, you've been replaced. Like you've been exposed too much, you're replaced. And that is kept secret. So if I have that card, I'm the only one who knows, not even my facilitator GM, not even my co-players. And there's a point in the story where it's like you reveal whether you were replaced or not. And I've had before where I've running where we're sitting at the table and we're about to have this very big conclusion. And one of my players draws the card that says, okay, everyone reveals if they've been replaced. And he's like, oh, well, that's not a problem because none of us have been replaced. And then every single other person at the table was like, oh, yeah. And they describe how they changed. And he's just sitting there like the only person not changed. He's like, well, now everyone's against it. It turned into this player versus player moment at this cumulative ending conclusion that was just so memorable. We still talk about it. And so that also reminded me like, why games are so fun and why I do this of like writing is so that people can have moments like that with their friends that they can carry and remember forever.
It's so amazing, right? Our board game group has been a big fan of hidden trader games basically from the beginning, but like the ball, just like the whisper cards, just up the ante so in such a satisfying way. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, and it's definitely something uniquely like that horror allows, because when we sit at a table saying, "Hey, we're playing a horror game," there's some written and unwritten agreements, and often making those explicit at the table. But that idea that like we're here to be a fan of the story, and like my character may not survive, and that actually might be the most interesting part.
Yeah.
And that is just really fun because it allows you to like have some moments that I might, if I'm playing a different, like a fantasy game where I am being the hero, but I might be reticent to do like the dumb move. Whereas in a horror game, right, I'm going to do it because I know that that's the right thing to do at that moment, even though I know it's the stupidest thing for me to like open that door where I hear the thing going on out beyond that, like thumping. And
drive your character like a stolen car.
Exactly. And horror just like lets you just like lay down that gas, and it just makes it interesting and fun and memorable.
So you mentioned that there's going to be a little bit of lore. You could explain those cool shadow eye monster things.
Oh yeah, so
dying to know more about that.
So that was fun because so the deluxe edition is sort of split into 5 parts. The first part is sort of like the we call it the investigator's guide, which is the rules, how to create an investigator, some like setups, and some like just like logistically like what a player would look at. And then there's the facilitator guide, which is this collection of essays written by Josh that really talk about like how to run horror, how to create clues, sort of those sort of if you've ever read Electric Bastionland, and how there's sort of those essays in the back of that, sort of in that oeuvre of like some advice. Because what I've also found is like for horror specifically, there isn't necessarily a lot of people who've been playing for a long time, but maybe haven't read about like how to run a game in sort of this style. So those have been really fun. And then there's the Catalog of the Strange, which was us being like, okay, let's make some cool monsters. Let's make what is it? What else we have? Here are some factions, monsters, which we call horrors, dead gods, resident artifacts, which are like the magic items, allies and adversaries, like NPCs, and sort of like there's a implied lore that runs throughout. But again, like I said before, like it's your table, your game, adapt, cut up, do whatever. But sometimes it's nice to have something to like through lines to play through. Then we have we call it the Haunted Pacific Northwest, which is sort of a collection, like a mini setting that you can use, because a lot of our adventures have been set in the Northwest. This is where I'm from. This is where I write from. And so it's just sort of like leaned into that. And then we have a collection of appendices, which are just really supplemental rules, extra tables. We have this thing called generic maps, which I'm really excited about, which Josh is a really good designer. And so what we did was did layouts for different sort of contemporary spaces and keyed them like as they would be normally. And then, so then you're like, okay, cool. I want to make this horrifying. So then you as the GM can really quickly tweak those, add the sort of narrative bits, and then change it. But it sort of is that foundational baseline. There's about
sprawl sites. I love like that.
So good, man.
Oh God, yes. So that's something that is just so underserved in what we do. Like having just the generic spaces, and then like slight guidance on like, here, this is how you use it. This is how you tweak it. You warp it. You make it strange, or and just like I love that. I'm excited about that now.
That was sort of a later edition, but it's a thing I always dreamed of putting a book out for. And so when Josh was like, we should do it. And then I sat and I keep like 30 different, like here's a motel, here's a trailer, here's a school, here's a bank, and just keep the locations for like what they would be in a normal every day-to-day thing. And then we have advice on like how you could twist it, how to add things. And so like it's like you could just keep using it. It was the thing I found, it's easy to look up for like, oh, I'm running a dungeon, so let me find some cool dungeon maps. Yeah. And I just didn't have that as easily for modern stuff. Like, of course I could find blueprints, but sometimes I really wanted that when I was starting to play test Liminal Horror. And so to be able to put that out is one of my more favorite things coming in the deluxe edition.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm excited about that. Is it all one artist this time, or?
Oh yeah, it's Zach through and through. So Zach, he was the first person I ever collaborated with.
Nice.
I was writing in Liminal Horror, and then I was hacking it, and then I had started seeing Zach's work on formerly Twitter years and years ago, and then I kept talking about it, and my wife was like, "Why don't you just reach out to him and ask him to do your cover?" And so I did, and so he did my cover, and that was the first like piece of like thing created for Liminal Horror that wasn't from me, and it sort of really set the tone for me, and I was like, set the visual style and sort of inspired me going forward. And I've had Zach on every project since then, pretty much. And then we hit the point with the deluxe edition that we decided, Josh and I, to officially just have, so like we're now the dev team. He's our creative art director. And so doing art throughout, and sort of we regularly are all partners in this thing that we're making. And so
that's great.
Making some pretty cool stuff for it.
And it's unifying, right? Like it had already felt pretty unified to me as a buyer and reader of the zines, but like I'm excited to see how that is pushed even further by just having it like all in one inclusive package. I think that's a smart move, and I think that's sort of an under-acknowledged thing about horror in specific, because you're chasing sort of one tone so often. So having one artist really, for me anyway, it helps sort of like establish that one tone.
Yeah, and it's super cool because we the way we all work, like Josh and I we write back and forth and then edit each other's stuff and like this back and forth. And now we've added Zach into it too. And there are times where Zach will do an art piece and that'll inspire how I'm writing this thing. Like I'll change it because of how Zach interpreted it. And then so it's just this like back and forth that really pushes everything to be the best it can be.
Big kind of like big picture question. Maybe I should have started with this one, but I think that it might be a good one to end on, actually. Why liminal? What is it about liminal spaces for you that pushes the horror and makes it unique?
Do you want the cool answer or the real answer?
I want both. Man.
Okay, we'll go with
I want you to give me the
first.
cool one, and then I want you to subvert the heck out of it.
Okay, cool. We'll go with the cool one. Okay, so the cool one was arrived at later on in terms of this idea. So liminal is like when you're at the precipice of change. It's usually spaces that are in transition, that sort of transitionary state. And so liminal, at least we've gone with, as it sort of dawned on us, that this game is much more about how your character changes. My character is no longer what they were. Mm-hmm. And that's how I can look at the characters at the end of an arc, and then I can see sort of the lasting impact of that story. And that's what's really interesting. So that liminality, that change of characters. Yes, liminal spaces specifically has that really large connotation in terms of like those like eerie, unreal, sort of empty spaces. And that definitely plays in because setting is important. Not everything though needs to be set in a liminal backrooms stuff for sure, right? We have a lot of like small town coastal horror. It ended up, we've warped into, I say liminal horror, you can make any kind of horror genre. The liminality is really specifically about like how your character will never be the thing that they were at the start of a session. If you're playing it right? They've seen these horrible things. They have these fallouts. They've had these magic artifacts that really like warp who they are. And that sort of like idea that like you just keep going back to it, right? That final girl keeps going back to the camp, keeps going back to the place that happened, right? And sort of starts that cycle again. That is a very true answer that we've come to now. That's better on our thing. The real answer was, I was writing this thing and I was like, I need to find a title. And I just typed in liminal horror because I've been seeing a lot of stuff. And then I had like 50 different title that just didn't work right, and then we finally hit that point of like the first one's just the one you should go with, and then guess what? I beat the API of Google, and so now liminal horror, my stuff comes up first. So, it ends up it worked out.
They say there is really no way to win at RPGs, but that is quantifiably the way to win at RPGs.
It is. Now was I able to trademark it? No, absolutely not. The trademark said absolutely not, and I was like, fair enough.
Yeah, Bully for you for giving it the old college dropout try. But yeah, no, it's gonna be a no.
They said this is way too
dog.
big, and then there's liminal. There's a magazine that has about meditation, and they said it beat you, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, hey, look, fair is fair, but at least
exactly. It just, to me, it reinforces and that's why old school play is so fun, because it's about the characters. It's about your character. It's about your thing that had one sentence and then you sort of built something out of nothing, and continuing that ethos here of I have my 7-Eleven cashier that then goes on this adventure that how do you go back to being a 7-Eleven cashier after that? Right.
Yeah. How do you go back to the Slurpee machine after you see what lurks in the dark?
Right? You're just you're like I survived Freddy, and now I have to go fix this machine.
Yeah,
which is its own kind of horror. Which then you go play Triangle Agency after that, because you're just the bureaucracy of horror.
Yeah, there really is.
Got to listen to a boss at a 7-Eleven.
Right? You're just I survived an axe wielding murderer, and now I have to be told what to do.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
The indignity.
What, you want to put the hot dogs on the roller? You don't want me to clean the toilet? No.
Watching the hot dog spin and then just remembering back to the person who did not make it out of the fire kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I you don't really think about that. The real yeah, we did it. We beat it. And it's oh yeah, you still have to finish high school, dude.
Right.
No.
Unless you're Ash. Ash keeps going back to S-Mart.
He goes back to S-Mart. He's you know what? I don't have a hand now. That's fine.
Yeah. He's listen, the bar I like is around the corner. My barber is 2 blocks that way. I can't leave this town.
Right. Or maybe it makes you really value the normality. So it just depends on your character. Right? You're you know what? I really love my simplicity.
Yeah. I champion the mundane, but I still carry a shotgun just in case.
Just in case.
So
Goblin, do you have any final thoughts? It feels weird to call him. I'm just gonna call you Goblin.
I know it's weird.
Can I call you Goblin?
Esquire, Goblin Esquire, actually. No.
All right. I'll get that at the end. All right, Goblin. It's been a hell of a good time chatting with you and learning about Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition. Anything you want our listeners to know about the crowdfunding campaign that's going to be rocking on BackerKit starting on April the 15th?
Yeah, so definitely go give it a follow. We're pretty excited about what we're putting out. We have a pretty simple options to go for. We'll have that you can choose from, and you can add on a lot of our official modules.
Nice.
If you're interested in Liminal Horror 2, we have the Liminal Horror Library, which goes over all the third-party adventures people are putting out. So there's a few hundred of those. Like I said, we have a killer community that has put out so many interesting different horror iterations that you can bring to your table as you're getting excited for the deluxe edition.
That's amazing. I am super excited for this. And we're recording this a little bit in advance. This episode is going to be dropping at some point in March. So one of the best things you can do for a creator is go to the campaign page and click that get notified button, because you definitely want to be one of the first people to know when these campaigns go live. And it's also cool to follow along. I mean, there's a lot of great material you can be checking out. Goblin, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Blue Sky, Goblin Archives, and then I don't even remember what the ending is for that, but I'm on Blue Sky. We're also on Discord. We have a Liminal Horror Discord that you can hop on, that is for people who are either playing or creating things for Liminal Horror. And also you can follow me in the itch or just anywhere. Reach out. Josh and I are really, if you have questions, we're pretty active on the Discord, or interests, or want to just even say, hey, drop us a line there.
Very cool. Well, Goblin Archives Esquire, thank you for joining us. Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition, April 15th on BackerKit. Go get notified today. This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on vintagerpg.com. I believe it's hard to remember, but I'm pretty sure that the mall, the bureau, and the core original Liminal Horror rules have all been posted about on Vintage RPG. So you could just look up Liminal Horror and see what's up there. We definitely did a podcast on it previously, too.
Yeah.
So go check all that stuff out.
We've done so many. It's yeah. Did we talk about it? I'm sure we did it.
I'm sure we at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram for now. And I'm always promoting stuff. If you want to check out 321 RPG, you can boogie on down to Exalta Funeral and pick up some of our books. If you want to get my Xenon Crowdfund Your Fucking Life is over on the Drive-Thru RPG store in PDF form, as well as anything Zombie Brainers related, you can find on my Etsy at Ham and Egg Publishing. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/VintageRPG. It's pretty cool. You get the releases a little earlier than everyone else. We try to drop them on Friday or Saturday, so you get them ahead of the crowd on the Mondays, and you get that for as little as $1 a month. At the $5 tier, you can jump in at one of my games. Every month I try to play a different game, and I usually try to play games that we tell you about on the show because we love them and we want to play them, so it gives us a great excuse to play them with you. Stu has a extremely deadly West Marches campaign at the $10 tier, which you can play in my game and you can play in Stu's game. If you want to learn more about that, there is an episode you can easily look up, Stu's West Marches campaign. It is not for the faint of heart. It is very deadly and very, very fun. We've also got a killer Discord community we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/VintageRPG. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor. Take care. Thanks for listening. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Schaefer Brown. Edited by R. Alex Murray. Check us out at vintagerpg.com.